the first thing I'd like to do is I'm going to have a poll that's going to launch. You should be seeing it now. There are 3 questions, and we really want to know who is in the room. Who are you? So we have just 3 questions. It's what level of schooling does your child attend? So it's elementary, middle, or high school, and pick as many as work for you. Then does your child receive special education services? Do they have an IEP? And then the last question is your child an English language learner? So with that, let me share the presentation for today, and I will introduce our fantastic host. Okay. So let's get into it. So thank you for being here. As you know, this is the first family engagement, family empowerment webinar of the season, of this year, of the semester. And we will be talking about how to understand summative assessment results. But we cannot do this without the unwavering support of our Board of Education. So on behalf of the Board of Education of the Alvord Unified School District, led currently by Ms. Carolyn Wilson, our president, thank you for being here. We can't do this work of really empowering and maximizing your child's education alone. We can't do it without you. And then we also thank you for recognizing that a lot of times we have some resources that we can provide, and that's what these dialogues are all about. We can't do it without you. You can't do it with us. It's about a partnership. So just thank you. Thank you for being here. Ms. Heather Goodwin is our Director of Assessment and Special Projects. Ms. Goodwin, it's all you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cisneros, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm excited for us to be able to talk about our summative assessment results and how you can access them, what they mean, and resources that are available to you as parents to support your students in their learning journey.
And Ms. Goodwin, we have the results of the poll in. Most of our families are from elementary school, about 68%, followed by high school, and then middle school is kind of trailing. A small percentage of our families that are here with us, 16%, do have students that receive special education services. Most of our families here don't. And then in terms of English language learners, it's an even split. It's 42 and 58%. So thank you, families, for having those answers. That really gives us a good picture of who we're having this dialogue with. And then one thing that I would like to remind you all is that we do have a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And then we also have the chat at the bottom of your screen. As we're going through the presentation, feel free to put something into the Q&A, something into the chat, raise your hand via Zoom. We don't want this to just us be talking at you or just sharing information. If you have questions, feel free to put it into the chat. And yes, we do have a question. Buenas tardes, disculpa, ¿habrá traducción en español? Sí. Actualmente en la parte inferior de su pantalla, si necesita esta información en español, verá una de 2 cosas. O verá un globo que dice Interpretation, haga clic ahí y puede cambiar el idioma de inglés a español. Si no ve ese globito, tendrá 3 puntos que dicen More o más, y por ahí va a haber una opción de interpretación. Seleccione eso y cambie el idioma de inglés a español. Ya tenemos a nuestra intérprete campeona, muchas gracias, Yvonne, que nos está apoyando. Ms. Goodwin, thank you.
Thank you. All right. So before we get into the actual student score reports, let's talk about what our summative assessments are and who participates in them. So summative assessments is just a fancy way of saying what tests do our kids take at the end of the school year to help us understand how well they've learned the content from that year. Our first set of summative assessments is called CASP. And CASP stands for the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. And it's an umbrella. Underneath that umbrella, it assesses students in the areas of English language arts, math, science, Spanish language arts, and has different formats for students that are participating. If your student is in grades 3 through 8 or 11, they will participate in the summative assessments in the areas of language arts, math. And if they are in grades 5, 8, and one time in high school, it usually happens in 11th or 12th grade, they also participate in science. The Spanish language arts assessment that falls underneath CASP is currently only used for our students who are enrolled in our dual language immersion program. And for the 23-24 school year, that meant students in grades 3 through 8. Now, if you have a student that receives special education services and they are participating in an alternate curriculum at the elementary level, we often see these students on a certificate of completion track instead of a diploma track. They participate in an alternate assessment called the California Alternate Assessment, or CAA. And that assessment is available for English language arts, math, and science. That is not.
Just a quick question, please. For the alternate assessment that you're speaking about, do all students who have special education services or all students who have an IEP, do they all get the alternate assessment?
No, it's actually only for the most significantly cognitively impaired students. So those are our students at elementary school that might be in a mod severe SDC setting. At the secondary level, your student might be enrolled in life skills courses. And again, most of the students that participate in the California alternate assessments will receive a certificate of completion rather than a diploma once they have finished their time with us. So great question, thank you. Now these assessments are given every year in the spring, typically between March and May, and the exact dates that your student participates in the assessment really vary by school within that window. The other summative assessment that our students participate in or may participate in is called LPAC. And LPAC stands for English Language Proficiency Assessments for California. And it assesses students in the areas of oral language, comprised of both listening and speaking, and written language, which includes reading and writing. The students that participate in LPAC are a little bit different than the students that participate in the CASP assessments. Any student who is identified as an English learner in grades kindergarten all the way through grade 12 participate in the summative LPAC every spring. So that's all grades. So how do I know if my student is identified as an English learner? There are a couple of ways. When you initially enrolled them in school, you completed a home language survey. And if you indicated in that home language survey that there was a language other than English spoken in the home, then you most likely brought your student into our district office and they participated in a couple of initial tests. One is the initial LPAC, which measures their performance and proficiency in English. And the other is the IPT, which looks at how fluent they are in their primary language. If it was identified through those assessments that they would benefit from assistance in learning English, they're identified as an English learner. And that's what qualifies them to participate in the LPAC assessment annually.
And then just for our families whose students are classified as English language learners, we have 4 sessions specifically for the LPAC and services for English language development. So we'll be talking and we'll be going in depth on LPAC at further sessions. So we're not going to get too deep into LPAC today. We have other sessions coming up for those as well.
Fantastic. So how do students take all of these summative assessments, whether it's CASP or whether it's LPAC? They're taken on a computer. And that allows your child to interact with the content and the questions in a variety of different ways. Some of them are questions that you're probably familiar with from when you were younger, like a multiple choice question. You choose the answer, A, B, C, or D. But technology also offers students unique ways to interact with the content, like dragging and dropping items, creating open responses as well. And why do we give these summative assessments? Primarily, we give these summative assessments so that we know how to best support your child in their learning journey. And I think that's an important takeaway, right? Because sometimes these tests can be really intimidating, even for our students, or they feel like they have to perform really well, or it might be associated with their grade or passing a course. And that's not the case. We want to see exactly what your student knows and what opportunities we have to support them moving forward. It's also a way for the classroom teacher and for you to see how they're progressing in the content areas over time. So let's get into those student score reports. You can access the student score reports through Aries Parent Portal. And I know Dr. Cisneros has put together a video, so if you need assistance with that, you can check out the video for getting into Aries Parent Portal. The students
that into the chat in just a bit.
Fantastic, thank you. The student score reports are available in several languages as well, and they keep adding more and more languages each year. Of note, you may go into Aries Parent Portal and see some score reports for your student, while others may be missing. So let's say your student is enrolled in dual language immersion and they were a 7th grader last year. If you go into Aries Parent Portal right now, you may see a student score report for English and math, but not see one for Spanish language arts. That's because that report hasn't been released from the state yet. So we do rolling uploads of the reports as they're released from the state. Check back frequently if you don't see the expected report in Aries Parent Portal right now.
Ms. Goodwin, we received a question in the Q&A, and I'm going to go back to this slide. How do students take the summative assessments? And so you talked about doing them online. Doreen wants to know, what if your student is to have an IEP? How do they do the test? How do they take the test?
For most students with an IEP, they still participate in the online administration of the assessment. There are specific resources and accommodations that are available to students with IEPs, and that's part of the IEP meeting process as well. So they'll identify that. Your team, when you meet, will help identify supports that may be beneficial for your student. That portion of the meeting is usually looking at the special factors page of the IEP. So you can make a little note. I want to really pay attention to the special factors page of our IEP meeting to address any accommodations that my student may need to participate in the summative assessments. But great question.
Right, and in that special factors page, it will go over. So Doreen, if your child does have an IEP, when you have your IEP meeting, make sure, as Ms. Goodwin said, you pay close attention to it. And then you ask those questions specifically for your child, because there may be some accommodations that the online system can provide or cannot provide. And it all, as Ms. Goodwin said, it's all dependent on the IEP. So it's important to, if your child is at that age to take these tests and they have an IEP, that you bring these questions to mind. Now, Elizabeth says, My son speaks English fluently, but doesn't read at his grade level. Does he qualify for an assessment? Elizabeth, by assessment, do you mean these tests? Miss Goodwin, if the child doesn't read at grade level, do they still take these tests?
Yes, if they are in grades 3 through 8 and 11 for ELA, math, 5, 8, and once in high school for science, and or if they are an English learner, the LPAC assessment. They still participate, yes.
So yes, Elizabeth, he or she will still be taking the test. And if they don't, if he doesn't read at grade level, then as Miss Goodwin said, that's a really important indicator, really important bit of information for you as the parent, which sounds like you already have it, but then also importantly for the teacher to know what his levels are, so that then the teacher can respond in the classroom. And I believe Miss Goodwin's going to be talking about that in just a bit.
So this is the cover page of a student score report, specifically for ELA, math, and science. Has some general information. You'll see that it comes from the California Department of Education. It will have your student's name included on it, and it will also have how the scores are reported. So on the right side of this image, you see, what do the scores mean? For ELA Math and Science, your student will receive an overall score as well as a performance level. In the picture you see on the screen, there are 4 levels. Level 1 being standard not met. Level 2, standard nearly met. Level 3, standard met. And level 4, standard exceeded. There's a little dashed line between level 2 and level 3. Ideally, we want our students to perform at that level 3 or level 4 area. That means that they are at or above grade level standards in terms of their performance on the assessment. In addition, on the bottom of the right-hand side of that image, you'll see that the assessment is broken down into different areas. And so you'll also receive a level for how your student performed in those areas or the subcategories of the test. They can either be above standard, near standard, or below standard. The cover page also gives you a quick little summary of what the assessment is. We talked about that a little bit, but it will be included in this cover page for you as well. So here is a sample of that student score report for English language arts. You can see that this is for a 5th grade student. In the top left, you see Jenny's overall score. Her scale score is 2540, and that corresponds to a level 3, standard met, which means Jenny's where we would like to see her. She's performing at the standard level. On the top right side, because Jenny is a 5th grader, you can also see how she performed over time because she took the same assessment in 3rd grade and in 4th grade as well as 5th grade. So Jenny progressed from level 1 in 3rd grade to level 2 in 4th grade to level 3 in 5th grade. The bottom half of the report talks about how she is performing in the different areas of the test. Post-pandemic, they've combined some of the claim areas. So now we see 2 areas for English language arts, reading and listening, and she's performing near standard there, and writing and research. She's also performing near standard in that area as well. This next snapshot looks very similar. This is Jenny's score report for math. So it's structured exactly the same way. You see in the top left, her scale score was 2,550, which also was a level 3 standard met, so where we would ideally like to see a student perform. Her score history over time in the top right, because she participated in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And again, she made progress from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 over those 3 years. And then how she performed in the areas for math. So concepts and procedures is one area. She was near standard. And for mathematical practices, she was also near standard.
Ms. Goodwin, we've had a couple of really good questions in the chat. I'd like to maybe just highlight them. Let me see here. Will I be able to verify how many assessments that my child will have during the school year?
If we're talking about summative assessments, absolutely. So it's going to follow those rules that we talked about at the beginning of our meeting here. So if your student is in grades 3 through 8 and 11, they will definitely participate in English, language, arts, and math. If they are in grades 5, 8, and once in high school, typically also grade 11, but sometimes it could be a senior. If they miss that particular assessment in 11th grade, they'll participate in science. And then if they are an English learner, they will take LPAC regardless of their grade.
So for example, if you have like a fifth grader will, because that's what Ms. Tan Fu, a fifth grader at Collet Elementary, will take the English language arts CAS, the math language arts CAS, the science CAS, and then if they are an English language learner, they will take the LPAC.
Correct.
All right. Okay, but if they're, for example, a third grader that is not an English learner, they will just take the language arts CAS and the math CAS. So I guess it all just depends on the grade and the particular child.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Good question, Tan. Adriana wants to know, do we offer tutor services for the subject that they struggle in?
So there's a variety of support that's available. I would suggest that you talk with your classroom teacher and your school site about what specifically they offer. Every school site has some version of win time, what I need time, where they differentiate and they provide support for students in academic areas based on their needs. In addition, there are fantastic additional supports outside of our day in our expanded learning program that are available to students, and then a variety of things that are very site specific as well.
And then we'll have a webinar on this, on what sort of services we have available in October. But we do also have through the district, we've purchased licenses for all of our students for different educational software that they can go in and access videos and how-to and kind of instructional guides. So I think to Ms. Goodwin's point, reach out to your site principal, your site teacher, your student's teacher, and say these are the areas where they struggle in. What sort of help can you give? There is a lot of services that we have district-wide, but then also site-specific. They might have a little bit more specific to the school site. So thank you for that question. Doreen in the Q&A says, how will I get on the contacts and know how my son is doing? So I think that's more not necessarily regarding the assessments, but if you aren't on your child's contact information, that would be a discussion to have with your site principal and site secretary to say, I'm this child's mom, and you guys can have that conversation about adding you to the parent portal and areas and getting access to that. Another person says, my ex was supposed to add me to my son's contact. He is new to the district. Same answer there. Go to the front office of your school site and explain the situation, and then they'll help you navigate through that.
I believe there's also some virtual assistance as well. A great thing to inquire with your site about. Some have tutor.com or things like that that your students can also access in order to get support. That's right. We do have tutor.com that our families can access and students can access
24-hour tutoring service on demand. It is a fantastic resource. So yeah, reach out to your school site and they can kind of guide you to that.
All right, so Dr. Cisneros has moved us on to the sample of the science student score report, and you'll see that that looks slightly different. So they're still going to get their scale score. In this example, Jenny has a scale score of 230, which places her again at level 3 in standard met, exactly where we would like to see. At the bottom on the left-hand side, you can see how Jenny's score compares to her school average as well as to the state average. So it's comparing that scale score to others in her school as well as others across the state. And then on the right-hand side, you get that level for each of the areas assessed on the science test, CAST. So Earth and Space Science, near standard, Life Sciences, near standard, and Physical Sciences, near standard. Remember, science is a little bit different in terms of who participates. This is just for students in grades 5, 8, and once in high school, typically in 11th grade, but it could be a senior if they miss it in their junior year.
Ms. Goodwin, we have a question. Marilyn wants to know, says, my daughter is in 4th grade, but she has only been enrolled in school the last 2 years. What I would like to know is if it is going to negatively affect her that she doesn't have, she isn't fully, her English isn't fully developed. So she's an English language learner.
Great question. So it may be a little bit more challenging for her to participate in the assessment, but remember the purpose of the assessment is really to help us figure out how we can best support her in her learning journey. So even though she's still learning English, she'll do her very best on the assessment, and then we will take that information in terms of next steps to provide differentiated instruction for her.
Yeah, so I also just want to let Marilyn know and all of our families here that it's not necessarily a test that you pass or you fail. It's an assessment that gives the teacher a really good insight as to what the strengths are of your child, but then also where your child needs a lot more or a little bit more guidance and support. And then that gives the teacher and all of our specialists that we have all around the district a direction to go with your particular child in order to give them that support. So it's not something that, you know, they Marilyn used the word perjudica, like negatively affect. Like, no, it's not something that you're going to fail. It's just a marker and a place in time that says this is where your child is. Now it's up to us, the schools, and you parents to really give the child all the supports that they need.
Dr. Cisneros, can you go back a couple of slides so that we can see one of the score reports that has the score history over time? So this one is perfect. In that top right, you see that in this example, Jenny progressed a level each year. I think it's really important, and going back to the question that was asked, your student is going to do their very best on this assessment. And what you want to do is talk with your student and help them set a goal for the next year. We want to see growth over time. So even if they don't change performance level, if you see their scale score improving, then that's an opportunity to celebrate the growth that your student had in that area in a year. That helps them feel successful as well, right? Because we can build upon those successes. So if they start to see that the more effort they put into learning, the more that pays off in their growth on these summative assessments as well. Thank you, Dr. Cisneros.
Thank you.
All right, now the last page of the student score report for English language arts and math provides some additional information. So now I can see how Jenny's essay performance is. It's broken down into some categories: organization and purpose, development and elaboration, and conventions. So whenever there's a free response or a performance task, when Jenny has to type in her answers instead of selecting an answer, they're scored using a rubric. And those rubrics look at those 3 different traits of writing. And so we can see here that conventions, Jenny is really excelling in. She got a 2 out of 2 there. Organization and purpose and development and elaboration are areas of opportunity for Jenny to improve upon. So when she's writing in class or for class, she can start to look at those areas as she is growing as a writer. That next section on the report is giving you a lexile and quantile measure. So the state of California and ETS partner with a company called Metametrics, and they help to identify the student's lexile level for reading and quantile level for math. That lexile level in particular helps the student and the teacher identify the level of text or reading passages that a student will be successful at. Our libraries also have lexile information about the books in circulation. So if Jenny knows that her current lexile level is 980L, she can find books that are in that general range, and she knows she'll be successful in reading them. Then at the bottom of the report, similar to science, you see how Jenny's score compares. Her scale score in ELA and math compared to the average scale score for the school and for the state. This next report is for our Spanish Language Arts Assessment, or CSA. The only students that participate in this assessment last school year, during the 23-24 school year, were students enrolled in our dual language immersion program in grades 3 through 8. So that would be a student in DLI at Valley View, Terrace, or Loma Vista. They took the California Spanish assessment, and this is what that score report looks like. So the cover page, again, very similar, gives you a brief little description on the right, says that she's going to get a scale score as well as a level or a range of how she performed and her performance over time.
Ms. Goodwin, for students who took the California Spanish assessment, this one, the CSA that you just shared with us that our students in DLI program take, do those students also take the CAS in English Language Arts and Math?
They do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then if they are a 5th grader that is in the DLI program and they're English language learner, they would be taking the English Language Arts test, the math test, the science test, the LPAC if they're an English language learner, and the California Science Assessments, or excuse me, California Spanish Assessments.
Correct. And all in the springtime,
Wow.
sometime between February and May.
Yeah. So there's a lot of assessments that some students do take. Again, they are all meant to really inform the teacher and the school. They inform Miss Goodwin and her team, and they also are meant to inform you as a parent on how to support the child and really kind of taking it from there and giving them that extra love.
Now, this California Spanish assessment, the student score reports for this particular assessment have not been released yet. We expect them sometime in September. So if you go into your Aries parent portal because your student is enrolled in DLI and was at Valley View, Terrace, or Loma last year, and you don't see your score report for the California Spanish assessment, don't worry. It's because the state hasn't released it yet. Check back throughout September. or even into October, and you should see their student score report for this particular assessment available at that point.
And I did put into the chat for our families to access the YouTube video that I had created that really helps them to navigate the Aries parent portal. And specifically, when you click on that link, it's going to take you directly to the section on how to find the assessment results. In the past, Ms. Goodwin, I remember that the assessments results were also physically mailed to our families. Do they still get a copy in the mail, or is it all just virtual now?
It is all electronic now through Aries Parent Portal.
Okay, so parents, it's up to you. Go into your parent portal and get the document to make sure you understand where your child is. This is all data that our teachers have already been looking at and been responding to with, but we ask that you go into your parent portal as well. Okay, we have another question that came in. My grandson is in the 7th grade. He was living in LA and now he's living with me here in Riverside. He only speaks English, no Spanish. Will affect him anytime. I'm not really sure the last part of the question, but let's say there's a 7th grader who is an English speaker, not a bilingual student or an English language learner. What assessments will they take, Ms. Goodwin?
If they are in 7th grade this year, they will take the English and the math summative assessments. They won't participate in science. If they're not an English learner, they will not participate in LPAC. And if they're not enrolled in DLI, they will not participate in the California Spanish assessment either. So just the two, English language arts and math. And it doesn't matter what district in California or what area in California a student lives in, because these are statewide assessments. If they transfer from one school or from one district to another, they're going to participate in the same assessment.
Oh, that's a good point. So the child who just came to Riverside from Los Angeles, he took these same assessments last year in the 6th grade. He'll be taking them here with us in the 7th grade. And if they, the families move around to different districts, as long as they stay in the state of California, these are the assessments that they will take.
Another thing that I wanted to mention, although these reports are only distributed electronically through Parent Portal, if you want a paper copy of that, you can always go into the school front office and they can print out a copy for you. So if that's something that you're interested in, don't hesitate to connect with your school and make that request, and they'll be able to provide you with a paper copy as well.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin.
Sure. All right, so now we are looking at the cover page of the Summative LPAC. If you recall, I mentioned there are 2 types of LPAC assessments, the initial and the summative. Students only participate in the initial LPAC one time, and that's when they are first enrolled in school if there is a language other than English spoken in the home. After that, if they're identified as an English learner, then they only participate in the summative LPAC, which is given every spring. So what you see on the screen is the cover page of the summative LPAC score report. Has a brief description on the right. They're going to get a scale score that corresponds with a level as well. Okay. The next page of the summative LPAC report is going to break down their score into 2 areas, oral language and written language. And then in each of those, you'll see listening and speaking for oral language and reading and writing for written language. You'll also get their performance over time. So in this particular example, Fort participated in this assessment in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade and went from a level 2 to a level 3, increased their scale score between grade 4 and grade 5, went from 1490 to 1500, but stayed in that level 2 range until grade 6.
And this LPAC again is LPAC is for our English language learner students. And then again, we'll be going really in depth into English language learner supports next month in a webinar just like this. So great.
Now, we do have some families in our informational meeting tonight of students with disabilities who have IEPs. So remember, if your student has an IEP, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will take an alternate assessment. The alternate assessments are only for those students that have the most significant cognitive impairments. At elementary school, these are our students that may be enrolled in a mod severe SDC program. And then at the secondary level, these are students that might be in a life skills program, and they'll be on a certificate of completion track rather than a diploma. If your student meets those criteria, then they would participate in the alternate assessment. A question came up earlier. So does that mean they still take the assessment on the computer? Yes and no. So if your student participates in the alternate assessment, they do still interact with the computer, but they also interact with the service provider that is most familiar with them. That means oftentimes it's their teacher that is helping them participate in the assessment. That teacher is able to recognize alternate response patterns that the student may use. If the student isn't verbal, for example, and they only communicate via gestures or a tablet, that teacher is able to respond between the student and the assessment because they recognize the unique way that that student responds. Okay. There's an example of that student score report for the alternate assessment for ELA on the screen right now. This is for a 5th grade student, also named Jenny. Their score is 591, and that would be a level 3, which is demonstrating understanding. And remember, this is understanding of the alternate standards that this student is engaging in because of their significant cognitive impairment. I can see Jenny's score over time in the bottom left-hand side, and I can also see Jenny's comparison between how she performed and what the state average is for another student taking the alternate assessment in 5th grade for English language arts.
We received a question in the chat. We have 2 questions. When they do testing for math or reading, how can we know exactly the level grade they read or the level of their math? So how do parents know? I think Adriana, if I'm reading your question correctly, not necessarily just your level on the 1 to 4 of the assessment, but whether you performed at your grade level.
So it's really going to be a combination of the level of how they performed on the overall assessment, but then also looking at that lexile and quantile, which is on the last page of the report. There are links in the parent report to get more information about the lexile and quantile level that will give you this is the range for this grade. So if your student is reading a 980L, as I believe Jenny was in the example, where does the lexile level of 980 fall within the grade range for that student?
Yeah, and let me see if I can pull that up again, because there was in that report that you shared with us, slide 12, I found it. Here, when you pull up the PDF of this report in your Aries Parent Portal, this is the link that Ms. Goodwin is talking about. And here, if, in this case, Jenny, our 5th grader, tested at the 980L level. Is that good? Is that bad? That's where the link will kind of show you what a 5th grader or where a 5th grader generally or typically performs. Would that be the same thing for the quantile, Ms. Goodman?
Yes, similar for quantile. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. And then another question came up. Does it affect students that they are English language learners. And I think we've already kind of touched on that. The only way that they are affected, Ms. Goodwin, please correct me if I'm wrong, is they just take the LPAC. And the LPAC tells the teacher and the school administration the level of the students' progress towards mastering the English language. And if they are still needing more support towards mastering the English language, then that's when the teacher provides the individualized supports for that child.
And if they're at a beginning level of acquiring English, then I would expect to see that that student will perform in the lower levels for the English language arts assessment in CASP. But remember, that's okay, because this is all about where your student is performing and where we want to help them go, right? So it helps us create that path for them. It's not a pass-fail kind of situation.
Right, right. I just want to make a note. Somebody's saying in the chat that they don't understand because they only speak Spanish. Si necesita esta información en español, Flori, parece que usted me puso no entiendo porque solo hablo español. Tenemos a Yvonne, nuestra intérprete del distrito. Puede cambiar el idioma de inglés a español. En la parte inferior de su pantalla verá un globo que dice Interpretation, o 3 puntitos que dicen more o más, y busca la opción de Interpretation y puede cambiar el idioma de inglés a español. Todo esto está siendo simultáneamente interpretada por una campeona, Yvonne. Thank you so much, Yvonne. I know that what you do is not easy to listen, to process, and to translate. That is hard, but we really very much appreciate it. And we have another question that came in from Ruby that I think really leads into this section of your presentation, Ms. Goodwin. Is there a guide for students before they take the test? So is there some way that we can prepare the students?
There's lots of ways that we can prepare students for these assessments beyond the fact that they're preparing every single day that they attend school, right? Because every day that they are at school, engaged in learning, they are preparing for this summative assessment. In addition to that, there are practice and training tests available for all of the tests that we've talked about today that you can view so that you get an idea of what students are going to participate in, that the students can participate in either at home or at school with their teachers. There are also interim assessments that your student may participate in, and that would be teacher directed. Those are like small chunks of very similar assessments that the classroom teacher can have students engage in. The slide that's on the screen right now is about starting smarter. And there's a starting smarter page for CASP assessments, and there's a starting smarter page for LPAC assessments. We're going to ask that you complete a brief survey at the end of our time together today. And in that survey is a link to the presentation from today. So you'll have the links for the starting smarter. It's also available in the score reports that you receive for your student.
And I've just dropped it into the chat as well. They want to just click that and it takes them to this page. And what is this page? How is this helpful?
So there are resources for you as a parent, ways for you to prepare for parent-teacher conferences, resources that you can access to learn about the standards that your student may be learning in their respective grade. Links to the practice tests so that you can experience exactly what your student experiences when they sit down with the assessment. And a lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more. There's videos in English and in Spanish that will help you out.
Those are always really eye-opening activities. Even me as an educator, I would go into these practice exams and see what we were asking our third graders to do, our fifth graders to do. even for our English language learners, they would do the annual LPAC assessments. We would see what the kindergartners are asked to do. And you really get a strong sense of not only what they're asked to do, but how they're asked to show their mastery, because the tests are written in such a way where it asks for questions in a very specific manner, and students need to answer in a specific manner. So the Starting Smarter webpage, matter of fact, Ms. Goodwin, would you mind if we open it up and start kind of just toying with it, exploring?
That would be fantastic.
Okay, let's do that. Let me open it up. Okay, so guide us.
So right on this landing page, you can see at the top that this is all about CASP. So this is talking about English, math, science, and Spanish. Off to the right-hand side, you also see a little bubble that says, I want to switch this page language to Spanish. So you'll get the same content, but you'll see it in Spanish. So you have two options there. If you scroll down on the page, you'll see a quick summary about what the CASP assessments are. You'll also be able to see the sample score reports for the different assessments that we talked about. And you can get that either as an image or as a PDF when you navigate through them. If you keep oops.
Sorry.
That's okay.
There we go.
You can check out the test questions. You can select your student's grade and what content area you'd like to see, and you'll be able to see some sample questions.
Well, let's see one now. So let's look at 4th grade math, and the claim is mathematical practices. Let's see what they're being asked to do. So here's a couple of sample questions. Each piece of fruit weighs, and then we have a fraction. There it is. 3/5 of a pound. Drag enough fruit into each box so that the total weight in pounds is within the given range. So you have to have between 1 and 1.5 pounds. So if we know that each piece of fruit weighs 3/5 of a pound, and we need to have between 1 and 1.5 pounds, how many pieces of fruit do we need to drag in to be within that range? Same question here, between 2.5 pounds. So you can see that it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. So the child needs to, in order to be successful in this question, needs to understand fractions, needs to understand ranges, needs to understand how to navigate this or use the interface, use the question and answer system, the software. So there's a lot that can go into this one question. If you struggle, you can just go show the correct answer, and then it'll tell you, right? Because this isn't like, these aren't the questions that they'll actually take. This is to give you a sample so that you can then have that conversation with your child to say, here's the answer, and here's why.
And I will share, oops, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, Tan says, will we be able to download the sample test questions? And yes, they're all on that website that we shared in the chats, the Start Smart. But yeah, you can go in here and change the grade, change the subject. We also have, as Ms. Goodwin said, the alternate math for our students with special education needs, and it's specific to the students who have written into their IEP that they're going to take the alternate assessments. So I'm sorry, Ms. Goodwin, you're going to share something.
It's a great way to really experience the items. I will say that our kids are all digital natives. So many times as adults, we struggle with some of the interface, like the drags and drops or the graphing, while I have watched even our youngest students. And the interface, they've got down for the most part, right? Most of our kids are just so comfortable with technology. The content part is what can be most challenging in most cases.
We do have a comment, it's not a question. Erica Gomez says, something that I would like to comment is that us as parents, we need to be aware that these assessments are taken into consideration when students that are English language learners are reclassified. Can you speak to that, Ms. Goodwin?
I can. So thank you for bringing that up. A student's performance on both the LPAC summative assessment and the summative assessment in English language arts are criteria for reclassification. So thank you so much for bringing that up. We definitely want to see our students encouraged to do their very best on those two assessments because they need to perform proficient on both of those assessments, LPAC level 4. So if you see their overall score for LPAC, there's that little dashed line between level 3 and level 4. So for a student to be considered for reclassification, they need to perform at that overall level 4 on LPAC. And this is English language arts. So
Right.
if we're English language arts, we would want them to perform at a level 3 or 4.
Here's this is what you were talking about. This is the LPAC.
Yes. And so that little dashed line falls between level 3 and level 4. So for LPAC to be considered for reclassification, we want them to perform at a level 4, and then in ELA at a level 3 or 4. There are also, I know that we're running out of time here, but on that Starting Smarter landing page, there's also some resources about just generally what you can do to support your child's learning. There's a PDF there that talks about putting in place structures for your student. For example,
Wow.
Stay in touch with your child's teacher. Make sure that the school office has your current contact information.
Here's the resource.
Yes, it's that second one there that says get the resource for supporting your child's learning. Right? These are just general good habits that we can have to support our students in their learning on a daily basis. And some additional resources at the very bottom of that about child development milestones, additional resources for parents, but there's a ton of great things that are on that Starting Smarter. You could probably spend the better part of a month going through the resources and clicking on a different one each day. So there's a wealth of information, and we're happy to support as well, as is your classroom teacher and your school site if you have any questions.
I think one of the main takeaways, and first of all, thank you, Ms. Goodwin, for sharing this information. We've had some really positive comments in the chat. Bianca said very good information. Thank you for sharing it with us. I think one of the cover pages that, excuse me, one of the takeaways, I read the word cover page and my mind kind of went haywire, is that the little dashed line kind of separates from where we maybe want our students to be to where they are. And then if we need support for our child, there are a lot of supports that we can get, but it would be up to us to then reach out to our child's teacher, our child's counselor, our child's principal, assistant principal. You have a team, a very strong, very robust team of educators here in the Auburn Unified School District, both at the district level and then also at every school site, that if you raise your hand and you say, I need help with this, my child is struggling here, we will respond. And because all of our team members at the school site really love and care about your kids and they want the best for them, as you do as well. It's just about having that conversation with them and saying, you know, my child is struggling in math. How can you support me? And then you also, as a parent, going through the Starting Smarter resources, going through the sample questions, talking about those with your child. Do we have any additional questions from our group?
Even just having that conversation with your student in the spring, hey, I know you're getting ready to participate in these assessments. Focus on doing your very best because you've worked really hard all year, and this is your opportunity to show everything that you've learned.
Absolutely. So we have one question. If the student has already been reclassified through LPAC, do they have to do the assessment again?
No, once a student is reclassified as redesignated fluent English proficient, or because we love our acronyms in education, RFEP. If your student has been reclassified, they no longer participate in the summative LPAC. Great question.
They still take all of the English language arts, the math test, the science test, if it's applicable to them. But the LPAC itself, the test that measures their progress towards mastering the English language, is not something they're going to keep taking.
Right.
Good question. And so we put into the chat a link. We have a quick Google survey, Google form that we'd like you to fill out that asks how helpful was this training, to share one thing that you've learned, and then any additional thoughts. And if you'd like us to follow up with you, if you have any specific questions for your child, you say, hey, I need help now, write in your contact information, and we'd love to reach out. So that's in the chat. And then if you also would like to take a screenshot of this and use the QR code that is ready. Thank you all for being here. Ms. Goodwin, would you like any last words?
I just really appreciate everyone joining us tonight. I hope it was helpful. Please do take just that minute to complete the survey. It helps us plan for next year's parent information night so that we can make any adjustments or address any additional questions that you may have as well. So thank you so much for being a part of your child's education and taking the time out of your day to be with us tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you, Yvonne. Have a good night, Yvonne. Families, if anybody has any particular questions you would like to ask now, I mean, we're here, and if you would like to ask them, now's your opportunity. Just a lot of good feedback, good comments, a lot of thank yous. Really helpful. Thank you for your support. What a wonderful presentation, Ms. Goodwin. Thank you.